President Trump pledging $20 billion for more data centers. Microsoft yesterday said $80 billion. Maybe Trump will move his bid up a little bit, Pete? More on that right after this. Bang! Well, Pete, what do you say? By the way, folks, again, that's Pete over there on that side. What do you say? Did you see that about Trump saying, hey, 20 billion for data centers, and people just kind of yawned because they said Microsoft just said 80 billion.
You know, I like the president, but I got to tell you something. That was a fact that he probably should have known going into that whole thing. If you've got just Microsoft spending 80 billion, I don't know. I would think that the U.S. maybe could spend a little bit more than Microsoft. Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe we're broke. But, you know, we both probably think that private sector is better doing that than the government getting involved there anyway. And there's a lot going on, Pete, because we had a pretty nice rally across the board, and then all of a sudden the markets got hit pretty good, and the NASDAQ is now down over 300 points. And maybe that's a little bit around who the next top banking person will be, Pete. I don't mean the head of the FOMC. We've talked about that, but the head of the Treasury and so forth. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be that? Well, maybe they're a little nervous about that, Pete.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things going on, and certainly you look at the markets, John, and some of the moves that we've had of late. And yesterday we saw it, but it was only from the Dow itself. The Dow, all of a sudden, after being up 300 points, finished just into the red. Today, you had the NASDAQ looking pretty decent, at least to start out, and then things sort of changed in a hurry, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did. And not surprisingly, the market flipped pretty dramatically when all of a sudden people went from really bullish on Mr. Wang's keynote to then saying, well, but he didn't really promise us all that much that we didn't expect. Yeah. So again, those are some of the things, Pete, and by the way, I know you'll cover it on Fantastic Futures, Pete, but somebody bought a lot of upside calls in the VIX right about the same time the market started to dive. So let's talk a little bit, Pete, about the broader market picture. We're 13 days out from a new president being sworn in, and we all know who that president is, but obviously there can be still some damage done between now and then. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, Pete, when Biden decided after almost 4 full years in office, he was going to expand the ban on drilling in certain areas of the country. Just don't understand what he's thinking.
Yeah, that was a little bit different. You know, my macro is going to be this, John. Yes, the reaction now is a little bit different, or a lot bit different than the reaction that we got absolutely last night with the CES and the keynote that we'd gotten from Jensen Huang and NVIDIA. You come in this morning and the stock makes this big thundering move to the upside, right? And then all of a sudden the talk about Aurora and all of that comes into play as well. It's already made a great move last year, making another good move this year. It's one of the stocks we're going to be talking about. But that was directly something we talked about yesterday was, what about the macro from CES? What's going to come out of that? Well, I think we've got a little bit of that today. It's robotics. It's a lot of different things. But after a nice spike early on for NVIDIA, people decided, you know what? Maybe we start selling this thing after it hits new highs.
And Pete, as a fantastic future today, I'm going to focus it back in on crude. And one of the reasons I'm focusing back in on that is I love Landman, which is, of course, I love Billy Bob, Pete. And I think he's doing a fantastic job on that show. Demi Moore, too, although she won the Golden Globe the other night for Substance or something like that, not for Landman because it hadn't been part of the category yet. But crude oil, Pete, between 68 and 73 or so was a good band. Now we're starting to break to the upside from there, and we're pushing closer and closer to seeing a 75 print. And that's something you don't really want to see, because that's going to perhaps impact consumers as well as big companies that transport stuff.
No doubt about it. My fantastic future. First, I got to hit this. Billy Bob's ex-wife is absolutely stunning. Anyway, when I'm looking at the 10-year, John, the 10-year is pretty interesting. If you just go back 3 months ago, we were at 375, and here we are today up there at 468. I mean, we're really moving around faster and at a different velocity than we have in the past. I find it really interesting, and that ties right into the volatility, right? I mean, we were under 16, and we all of a sudden 16, 16 and a half, 17. We're really making a move to the upside now. So a 6% move is a pretty quick move, I think, out of the VIX. And you, I think, had seen some unusual going on in the VIX as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and in fact, Pete, it'll be interesting to see. Now, the timing of the VIX trade is not usually as good as Nancy Pelosi's timing, or Mitch McConnell. Take your pick. When either one of those two decide to buy some stock, folks, it's almost always just bang, that thing moves. Not so much with 50 Cent. 50 Cent is usually setting him or herself up for a longer term move. So we'll keep our eye on that. And by the way, Pete, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you which wife of Billy Bob Thornton, because he's had 4. So
I'm just going to say this. His ex-wife on Landman is stunning.
Oh, Ari Lauder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So not in real life. In real life. IRL, in real life, folks, his wives, plural, 4 of them, including Angelina Jolie, Pete. Several of them were rather stunning, and
Yep.
Angelina certainly falls into that category. But yeah, I think his wife on Landman is pretty special too.
Yeah.
And his daughter
Yeah.
on Landman.
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's dive in, Pete, to Aurora. AUR. Why? Well, because people came piling into this thing because they're going to be delivering a driverless truck. They've partnered now with NVIDIA, as well as a company called Continental. I think that's Continental out of Germany, Pete. But this is going to be very interesting. Many of us thought that Elon Musk might indeed come out with a driverless truck before Aurora, but now it seems like they're in the final phases, Pete, of testing to get this thing on public roads. And you can only imagine, folks, how many people could be put out of work if indeed we embrace this, autonomous or driverless semis and delivery trucks.
No doubt about that, John. Although I know one thing for sure about the whole truck industry, they have a hard time finding drivers in the first place, quite frankly. I've heard that time and time again. I got a good buddy of mine who's that's part of the world that he finds himself in this financial world of ours, in trucks and deliveries and all the rest of it. And yeah, that's been a difficult thing. This partnership with NVIDIA absolutely got people excited about it. And you look at Aurora, they've got a great balance sheet. Their cash burn is pretty high, but with the new partnership, I think this could be pretty damned interesting. I think another thing coming away from NVIDIA again, and they're going to start deploying. It looks like they had to delay it, but they're going to start deploying some of these. And they talked about doing 20 initially, and then they said, well, we're going to take 10 trucks out there and we're going to send them out there April 2025. That ain't that far away if they can stick to that one, John. It could be very, very interesting to see. But I'll tell you what, you look at where this stock is today, I think it hit those new 52-week highs. 983 is what it got up to. Pulled back a little bit off of that, and the market getting hit pretty hard, pulls things all back a little bit. But this is an amazing move to the upside. And like you said, these guys might be first. It looks like they are first in front of Tesla.
Well, I think Elon is smart to concentrate on cars, first of all, Pete, as far as Tesla goes, rather than trying to get over into semis at the same time. But he's a guy that is a multitasker, so we'll see. Obviously, there won't just be one winner in this, just like there's not going to be just one winner in cars, although Elon has a pretty sizable head start. Pete, I'll offer this up too. NVIDIA, the 52-week high for NVIDIA was 153.13. We hit a new 52-week high today, and now we've pulled back nearly $12 from that. That didn't just happen now, folks, but we're letting you know that there's some pretty good resistance apparently just above 150, and we ran into it today, and the market flipped along with NVIDIA. All right, let's talk about Enovix, Pete, because these guys make silicon batteries. Now, you guys hear us talk all the time about lithium-ion batteries, and lithium has become nearer and dearer by the day, certainly by the month, as people scramble for getting lithium and cobalt and all the things, nickel, that manganese, that go into making the batteries that companies like Tesla and I'm sure like Aurora will be using. But Enovix, Pete, these guys got a huge order for a bunch of their silicon batteries, and because of that, the stock jumped by almost 20% today.
Yeah, high performance, they called it, battery manufacturer. They absolutely delivered on this, John, because of the fact that they've got this huge order out there right now. You're looking at a stock that move is uncanny, right? I mean, it absolutely incredible to see that kind of a move to the upside. It hit 16. It's very close to 52-week highs. Didn't quite get to those 52-week highs, but damn close. I'll tell you who's not too happy today, and we talk about it all the time. Those shorts, the shorts, they're 26 to 30% out there, John, that are on the short side of this one. And wow, I think that they're feeling a little bit of pain. You can understand why they were shorts. The cash burn is high. The balance sheet is teetering on pretty awful, I would say. But because of this prepaid deal, this puts them in a very, very comfortable spot, a much more comfortable spot than they were in. And I think that's why we're seeing this stock make this move to the upside. I wouldn't be surprised at all if over time, John, we start seeing this stock get a lot closer to 20 in the not too distant future. It was 16 today, 18 something is the highs. I don't think 20 is that far-fetched for this stock to get up to because of the fact of what they do and what they can potentially deliver into the future.
Well, speaking of the same, Pete, I'll trade off of that. Neri, which is INARI, Neri Medical, but the symbol is NARI. It only trades about 61 calls a day, Pete, in November. In December, it traded about 450 calls a day. So obviously, curving up in terms of interest in the stock. Well, yesterday it traded almost 8,000 calls. Now, by any measure, that's a lot more than it normally trades. And guess what? Today's Stryker, SYK, says, we want to step in here and take a bite of this company because we'd like to offer this. Stryker's, of course, a medical device manufacturer. They say, we'd like to be part of this exciting future for this, whatever it's called, venous thrombolism or whatever it is, Pete. You'd know more about it, VTE. But this is just a big win for anybody that was a buyer of those calls.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And then today, John, just to follow up what you were talking about, the option volume that came into this thing, incredible. How about the stock volume today? Last I looked, I think it was just north of 15 million shares, averages 1.1 million shares a day. Again, you've got huge short interest here, John. They haven't made money since 2021. So they've been kind of waffling around a little bit, but because of the different devices with the vascular side of things, that's another piece of Stryker. Stryker does a little bit of everything, actually. They do a great job. $4.9 billion acquisition. I'd say that's pretty impressive. 60% premium. Again, they're going for they literally were swinging for the fences. An $80 stock, that's what they're looking to pay, and it's very close to that level. There's a lot of reasons why this makes a lot of sense, I think, for Stryker. And maybe now this is a company that with this partnership or with this takeover, they're going to be able to get themselves in a lot deeper now to the vascular world, which is something that I think that they feel like there's plenty of profits out there into the future.
No doubt. No doubt, Pete. Well, yesterday we talked about Fubo, not Fubu, not Pete's pal that did for us, by us, but rather Fubo, which basically was a sports streaming channel that got that deal yesterday announced from Disney and the Hulu side of things. Today, Pete, it's Roku. But let me show you a little something on this move out of what happened, Pete, with Fubo, because there was plenty of unusual activity in Fubo yesterday. Pete and I talked about it when the stock was $3.50. Stock went through 5 yesterday. So those January 10th expiring 4 calls, they exploded, and the stock went up over 6 today, up another 20%, Pete. So just because a deal's announced doesn't mean that's the last move to the upside or the downside. And in this case, Pete, I think it probably focused in a lot of people on Roku because they just announced 90 million streaming households, right?
Yep. Well, and they're looking to try to figure out when they're going to start making money, John. That's something that you haven't heard me say in a while, but you know, we look at all these companies, we look at what they do, we're fascinated by them, and a lot of people probably have no awareness to the fact that, hey, Roku doesn't make money. That's a bit of a problem at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
They do have a great looking balance sheet, John. They've got free cash flow of $500 million, but at some point there's got to be some profitability. And with 90 million streaming, I would think that they're in a position where they ought to be able to turn some of that into a bit of a profit. Strategic partnerships, yes, they've got that. There's a lot of different things. They talk about their revenue growth into the future of about a little over 10%. That's pretty interesting as well. One of the things that I thought was a little bit puzzling, they don't think they're going to be profitable for another 3 years. Now, I don't know why it's at that level, John, but that would be one reason where I just kind of pull back a little bit and say, whoa, when are you going to make the money? Let's get that to be a lot closer than 3 years out. They've got to figure that out, in my opinion, John. Otherwise, it's a great pop. It's a great company. They do a lot of things well, but they've got to show us that they know how to make money.
Yeah, well, this one popped to almost 85, Pete, today, and then sold off. Now, is it market related? I think a lot more people are looking at it the way Pete just did, folks, and saying, you know what, this is interesting, but at 84, not so interesting. And they sold it all the way down to what, Pete? Under 78 right after that initial pop. So not so great for Fubo, Roku, but still good news for Fubo.
Yeah, they're doing well.
All right, let's talk some sports, Pete. What do you got today?
Well, do we got a clip, right? Don't we want to play?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Today we have a clip, folks. And this is always one of those popular things. And there's Stinky, Pete.
No.
And it's not because I don't like him, folks, but that was his nickname, Stinky.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take a listen to what Stinky had to say about Pete's and my favorite pro coach.
A couple years ago, Dan Campbell said, the reason we go for it on 4th down, and I'm just talking to him, he goes, because I want my guys to have zero fear about 4th downs. I want to do it so much that there is zero pucker factor when it comes to 4th down.
Pucker.
You know what you saw? You saw one pucker factor for the Minnesota Vikings doing it. You saw zero for the Lions, and exactly who they are. I talk about identity of your football team, who we are, how we're built.
That's why we love Dan Campbell, John.
And there is nobody
True.
that understands that better than Dan Campbell, and there's no team that responds to their head coach better than the Detroit Lions, because it's exactly what they do. We're going to San Francisco.
They
we're
feed
gonna
off
get that number 1 seed. We're going there, and we're going to play our butts off. And you know what? They did in a shootout against the 49ers, and then they line up again this week and do the same damn thing to Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and he's right about the pucker factor, Pete, because you're down there on the goal line virtually on 3 separate possessions, like you and I said yesterday, Pete.
Yep.
We're not talking 3 downs, we're saying 3 separate possessions. You're inside the 10, and on 2 of those, you're inside the 5, and you can't cross the goal line. So they ended up having to go for it on the 4th down one time. And then, like he said, because of the pucker factor, they said, screw this. Let's just get some field goals. No, you're on the road. You have to score. You can't just get field goals. I think that was a mistake Minnesota made, Pete.
And Dan Campbell, John, he'll go for it. It doesn't really always even matter where on the field they are that he's going to go for it on 4th down, because they've gotten so comfortable with doing that, right? And the players love his confidence. They love to have that confidence. We all know that. And it's just amazing to me just what he's been able to accomplish and how they built that team. He's done a magnificent job. There's a lot of coaches out there, John, that don't have jobs. So I'm going to segue into that, which is the NCAA's got a lot of really great coaches right now, I think. And if you look around, I mean, are some of them not just going to bounce around still in college football, but are they going to potentially be coaches in the NFL? A lot of openings already. You talked about it yesterday. Black, Monday came out. We added one more to the list as we were going on to the show yesterday, Jacksonville with Peterson. But you've got pro guys, of course. You've got Flores with the Vikings, the defensive coordinator. People love him. I'm the one guy who pushes back. It's not that I don't like him, John. I think he does a very good job. He does a lot of things to confuse offenses. But if you look a little closer at the Vikings defense, and I'll tell you, the game that we just saw, Detroit, with a lot of other people, 28 million other people watching that on TV, it's amazing, John, because when you look at what they've been able to accomplish and what they've done, and I'm talking about the defense on the Minnesota side, yeah, they've done a better job at times. But second half, the Vikings basically just said, all right, we're tired. We can't stop the pass, right? And Detroit put up 390 yards on the Vikings. And by the way, there were 8 other times this past year where they were over 300 yards against the Viking defense, 6 of which they were over 390 yards on the Vikings defense. So I don't know. Is Brian Flores the right guy? Maybe he is. I know Aaron Glenn and the defense for Detroit, by the way, they completely stuffed the Minnesota Vikings on their offense, right? Their offense was healthy. All their receivers were playing. The tight ends were playing. The running backs were playing. And yet, when you've got 11 guys on IR on the defensive side and you stuff the Vikings, I would say Aaron Glenn gets a lot of credit for what they've been able to accomplish. Ben Johnson, the offensive coach. Vrabel, we talked about him yesterday. Kellen Moore's another one. But how about Kirby Smart, Matt Campbell, who's at Iowa State, who a lot of people are thinking maybe he could jump to the NFL, John. Lincoln Riley at USC, maybe. A lot of people have talked about him. Sarkisian at Texas. What do you think? I think it's a lot closer now than it ever has been with college coaches having to do the same types of things as NFL coaches. They've got NIL, that's basically how much money do we have? We've got a cap on that, sort of, because it's whatever you were able to generate, right, from the collective, as they call it. And free agency, we call it the portal in college. It's really turned back into something where the NFL and the NCAA are pretty damn similar when it comes to football and football coaching and having one-year players. Look at Ohio State. Every year since they started, they got a new quarterback every year, right? Somebody who finally leaves somewhere else. This year it was Kansas State, and now the kids lighten it up, right? And it's just the way college football is. So is there somebody who stands out the most for you, John? Do you got to stick to the NFL if you're looking around for a new head coach?
Well, if Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach, Pete, would have done in last winter what he's about to do this winter, I'd say it would be him. Yeah. Because he's said, I'm going to go get 35 guys off of the portal. So he said, if you think you can play, put your name in now. So like you said, Pete, it's a combination. The head coach in college is a combination of general manager and head coach. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, and you've named one of them in the past, Pete, which was Stanford. Yeah. They basically picked a former Stanford player, Luck, to be their general manager, not their head football coach, but the general manager, because that's a real job now. There are going to be guys that are going to get that job. And I think Kirby Smart's about to find out that trying to coach and be that money guy off of the portal and everything else is an even bigger job than he thought. So if he's successful at it, great. But if he isn't, I think they'll have a general manager down there and maybe even a new coach, Pete, because they're not going to tolerate if he spends a whole bunch of money on the portal and alienates a bunch of kids that he's already recruited.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing. The game is changing very rapidly, and it's but I think in most cases, John, maybe it is changing for the better in terms of the viewing. I mean, you could have an opinion on whether you should pay these kids or not, but you take a look at the viewership in college football, it's pretty amazing. I wanted to jump to our next one, which is NFL ratings. And you want to talk about viewership? 28.7 million people, John, were watching the Minnesota Vikings play the Detroit Lions. And in the second half, it wasn't even a game, and they still stuck around and were still watching. So they have all kinds of ways to sort of test all this stuff out. I find it amazing. How about this stat? 72 of the top 100 shows was NFL. I mean, it's amazing the dominance that they have created, and that's not just against sports, that's against everybody, right? Now, if you want to go sport to sport, we talked about this already, John, but November, the NBA was down 28% at ESPN. 28%. So the NBA is struggling a little bit. The NHL always has a bit of a struggle, of course. Major League Baseball is 162 games, so that's fatiguing as hell for people. But the NFL and throw in college football, the viewership is absolutely off the charts. And I mean, it's stunning just to see what's going on. And I think in college football, with the way they were able to create this new playoff system with the teams that they've got, I think they've done an outstanding job. We got some big games in front of us this week.
Well, Pete, I asked Grok, which is not an old teammate of Pete's, but instead it is Elon Musk's AI on Twitter. I asked Grok, okay, what was the viewership for the Christmas Day games for the NFL? 24.2 million viewers per game. It was the Chiefs Steelers and the Ravens Texans, both of them over 24 million. Now, what was the NBA's viewership? Well, let's see. NBA averaged 5.25 million viewers per game. And some of those games, Pete, were as little as, for instance, the Nuggets Suns was under 4 mil. It was only 3.8 million. So there ain't no doubt that you're right, and that the king of ratings is football, pro and then college, and hockey, baseball, pro volleyball probably outdraws the NBA, Pete. That's how bad the NBA is doing in terms of TV audience. People just don't care right now.
Yeah, it was actually comical when LeBron got out there and he says, "Hey, man, we own Christmas Day. You guys can't be here." And it's like, you don't own anything. and part of the problem is right there. He should point it himself, because these guys who do all of that load management have ruined the NBA. And I don't know, until they can actually figure it out, John, I don't think it gets any better. I think it only gets worse, and people will get more and more frustrated about the NBA and how they've reacted and how the commissioner has actually allowed all of this to happen. And that's a big problem. I mean, the NFL, sure, they've got their own problems here and there, but they don't have too big of a problem when you look at the fact that their ratings are just going up, 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 up. And it's absolutely incredible how well they're doing right now for that.
Yeah, that's why they can even overpay like they occasionally do, Pete.
Right.
Like when Netflix goes after a couple games and pays $100 million and things like that. How does that happen? Well, they know they're going to get payback on the people, just like they got payback for a horrible fight. I mean, Tyson versus Jake Paul, that was a terrible fight. But they got people to watch it, and some of those people probably had to become Netflix subscribers just to see it.
Yep.
Anyway, well, thanks for joining us, folks. Remember, click right down there. There it is, right down there. Bang. If you click there, you could join us out in Las Vegas at Bally's. No. MGM. Because yesterday I said Bally's and everybody gave me crap, deservedly so. But MGM Grand, folks, it's going to be, if you want to get the whole Cardone experience, you have to get there on the 19th because he's doing a 3-day, 19th, 20th, 21st. And then he comes over and joins us. We join him for the first 3 days, and then he joins us for a trading conference with some of the biggest traders in the game, whether it's technicals, whether it's unusual option activity, whether it's stocks, crypto, you name it. We will have some of the best on stage for that full day, the 22nd of March. And I'd encourage all of you to, again, check that out right there. Scan that code and sign up now before prices go up. We'll be back tomorrow, folks, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.